Much. Thanks to everyone for inviting me here. I really appreciate it. Annie mentioned my name is Mike Foote. I'm a state senator from District 17. That's just north of here. I don't have any of Broomfield, but I have Eastern Boulder County, Louisville, Lafayette, and Longmont. I've been in the legislature for 8 years. One of the things that I've done while being in the legislature is I helped pass the national popular vote into our law last spring. So I have a little background in the bill, and also I wanted to talk to you about that, and you guys are all going to be seeing it on your ballot here in 2020, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that.
Which one is it?
This one. I hope that's really blurry and not just my eyesight. Anyway, so while we're setting the PowerPoint, I will also let you know that I'm working with the Yes on National Popular Vote campaign. It should be a PowerPoint.
Yeah,
Not
that's
just a
not
picture.
This one?
Yeah. And the Yes on National Popular Vote campaign, of course, will be, as the name certainly more than implies, will be campaigning to make sure that the national popular vote stays in Colorado law. And when you see the ballot measure in 2020, then hopefully if you believe in the national popular vote, if you believe in one person, one vote, and that the most votes should win, that you'll be checking yes on the national popular vote coming up here in the fall of 2020. So while we're setting up the PowerPoint, and so this by the way, I'm not a believer in death by PowerPoint. I have a couple graphics. We're not going to kill you by PowerPoint. It's only a few slides to make a couple of points here. But I want to go over maybe 10 minutes, if that, of an explanation about what's going on with the national popular vote, and then open it up for Q&A. Because in these presentations, what I've found is that that's really the most valuable part. There might be a couple questions that people have, so be thinking about that, and then we'll go into Q&A, and I'd be happy to do it. And also, by the way, thank you. I really enjoy this venue. I was enjoying the relaxing music that they were playing over. So I kind of felt like I should be meditating or something like that. But I noticed when I was about to speak, the music went off, I think. So I don't know what that tells us. But so anyway, first of all, let me ask a question, and we'll get started this way, and then we'll go a little bit into the ballot language. You all may know that President Obama, in his first term in office, visited the state of Colorado 17 times during those 4 years of his first term in the presidency. Does anyone want to guess how many times our current president, President Trump, has visited Colorado? I'm seeing 1, twice, 0. The answer is 1. He visited the Air Force Academy last May to do the commencement there. That was the only time. So here's another little question. So I've lost track, but I think our current president has done somewhere between 75 and 80 campaign rallies already up to this point since he's been elected. I don't know, maybe 73 or something. I think he's in Ohio today, as a matter of fact. So he's done, let's say he's done between 70 and 80 campaign rallies already since he's been elected. How many of those do you think have been in the state of Colorado? 0, that's correct. He hasn't been here for a campaign rally. Does anyone want to hazard a guess as to why that is? He would lose. So the reason is that he hasn't made many trips here, just one trip really, is that we're not a swing state anymore. We were a swing state, as you all know, from 2008, 12, and 16, considered to be a state that could go either way for the Republican or the Democrat for the presidential candidate. There's really no sources that I know of, either partisan or nonpartisan sources, that have Colorado as being a swing state. So I think it was mentioned that he knows he would lose. That's probably a more concise way of saying it. The state's not in play in 2020. We're not a swing state anymore. And that's because of the way that our electoral college is set up. You know that there's swing states and non-swing states. And you know that there's only a handful of swing states every election that really determine who's going to be elected president. Colorado has been that in the past, but is not that right now. So we're not going to get the presidential visits. And this may be a good or bad thing depending on who you are, but we're probably not likely to see as many commercials and all the hoopla about the presidential campaign coming up this year that we have before. So again, that might be a good or a bad thing. So that's really the basis for what I'm talking about with the national popular vote. And I'll stay on the theme of showing you a really thick book here. Your assessor showed you the same thing The National Popular Vote actually has this book right here. It's about 1,000 pages written about it. Okay, so and they have a website that has all this on there, and it has anything you could possibly know, including any question that someone's had over the course of the last decade or and a half that this has been in state law in some states. But I can boil it down to you in 2 sentences. National Popular Vote means that every vote is relevant, every vote is equal, no matter where you live, no matter what the election is, and the most votes wins. That's what the National Popular Vote is. So imagine that, the most votes wins. What a novel concept, right? I mean, that's something that we know about in every single other election that we have, the most votes wins. As you, I'm sure know, the last president was not elected by the most popular votes, but he's not the only one. We've had 4 other presidents elected in our history while not winning the most popular votes, but winning the Electoral College votes instead. So before I go any further, I want to lay the foundation here a little bit about what you're going to be seeing on your ballot coming in this November, because I mentioned that we passed it already, so it's law. The governor signed it. Our membership in the National Popular Vote Agreement is already law, but you're still going to see it on your ballot because the ballot question aims to get the affirmation from the state of Colorado, from Colorado voters, that it actually should be in law. This is a little unusual. It hasn't been done for a long time. We're all used to, if there's something not in law, voting for it to be in law, but we're not really used to something being in law and having to affirm that it's in law. And then this one is actually the latter. So I wanted to show you a little bit about, actually I wanted to show you the ballot language that you're going to be seeing. So as you can see, it's pretty clear. It's pretty short, concise. Shall the following act of the General Assembly from last session be approved? An act concerning the adoption of the agreement amongst the states to elect the President of the United States by national popular vote. And he refers to Senate Bill 19-042, which was the bill that I ran along with other legislators that put it into law. So, as I said before, if you believe in the national popular vote, if you believe that one person should equal one vote, every vote should be relevant, and the most votes should win. If you are a yes on all of those things, you're a yes on the national popular vote, and you should be voting yes on this ballot measure. So let me take just a couple minutes to talk a little bit about the problem and then why the national popular vote is a great solution and why I believe in it so much, and then we'll just turn it over to questions and answers. So, I'm a Democrat. I don't usually quote Scott Walker, just FYI. But he said something when he was running for president. You all know that he's the former governor of Wisconsin, which is now a swing state. He said something that was actually very accurate when he was first running for president. Somebody asked him, well, what do you bring to the table? Why do you think you should be the Republican nominee? Why do you think that you can win the presidency? You're the governor of Wisconsin, but that's only 1 out of 50 states. What difference does that really make? So the point what he was making was, well, Wisconsin's a very important state, and really, as a matter of fact, the 50 states aren't going to determine who the next president is. It's going to be a handful of states that will determine who the next president is. And in 2016, there were considered to be maybe 10 swing states total. What we're looking at, you're familiar with the red state, blue state. What we're looking at is maybe 4 swing states this time, maybe 5 swing states this time, okay? So, for example, in 2016, about 25,000 voters in Michigan determined which way Michigan would go. I think it was maybe about the same number in Wisconsin. You know, you can quibble and say maybe Ohio might be a swing state. There might be a couple of others on this map. Maybe Arizona won't be. But the bottom line is that there's very few swing states coming up in this election. So all of the resources, all of the attention, all of the visits, all the presidential candidates are the 2 major ones. All they're going to care about is can they win these handful of states. That's all they're going to care about. Which means that the vast majority of Americans, plus all of Coloradans, aren't going to be on the radar. The presidential candidates aren't going to care about us, just like they don't about almost all the other states except for these swing states. So that means a number of things I think that are important to highlight. One of those is that if they don't care about Coloradans or they don't care about people in Wyoming or South Dakota, et cetera, that means it's not going to really factor into their winning strategy and who they're trying to appeal to. It also has a lot of effects in the policies that they implement if they are elected. And of course, I'm happy to go into those in a little more detail later if you want. And also importantly, in my opinion, it also leads to a much lesser voter turnout in non-swing states. If you take a look at, and we'll do Q&A in just a second. If you take a look at the turnout in swing states versus non-swing states in 2016, it's much higher in the swing states. Does anyone want to guess what the voter turnout was in Texas in 2016, a non-swing state in 2016? Does anyone want to guess? It's okay. You can just throw out a number.
47.
47?
25.
25?
32.
32? It was 43%. 43% voter turnout in the state of Texas. Hawaii was the lowest. They were at 38%. So it's not a red state, blue state. It's a swing state, non-swing state thing. And people really know if their vote doesn't really matter. If you want to vote for the Democrat in Mississippi, or if you want to vote for the Republican in Illinois, it doesn't matter because you know how the state's going to go. And this is not just big states, small states. If you want to vote for the Republican in Delaware, if you want to vote for the Democrat in South Dakota, it's the same result. And that's because those states are not swing states. They know that they're either going to be red or blue states, therefore they don't matter in the presidential campaign. So, the solution is the National Popular Vote Interstate Agreement. Now, I know that there's some even presidential candidates on the Democratic side that have been talking about abolishing the Electoral College. I want to be clear, this does not abolish the Electoral College. It uses the authority that the Constitution has granted the states already for the state legislatures to determine how the electors in those states are allocated. So it doesn't get rid of the Electoral College. It keeps the Electoral College. You still have to have 270 electors to win in order to become president. But it just changes the way that the electors are allocated. Instead of the most votes in that particular state winning, all of the electors, the winner-take-all system, it means that the presidential candidate with the most popular votes in the entire country ends up winning the state's electors, and also the electors of all those states in the National Popular Vote Agreement. So instead of looking at a Colorado election, it really is an American election, which is what it is, because the president and the vice president are only statewide elected offices. They're elected amongst Americans as a whole, as opposed to just Coloradans or people in Wyoming or Nevadans or etc. What are people in Wyoming called anyway? Wyomingans? I don't even know. I'll have to figure that out next time I get this. So, the National Popular Vote Interstate Agreement, as I mentioned, it's something that's been around for several years. It was first introduced actually here in Colorado in 2006. It didn't pass the first time it was introduced, but it has been passed in 15 states plus Washington, D.C., equaling a total of 196 electoral college votes. Now, you need to have 270 electoral college votes in order for it to take effect, because that's the number it takes for the presidency to be won. So we're not there yet. There's still several states that need to go or need to be part of the agreement before it goes into effect. And I'm sorry to say, depending on your perspective, we won't be seeing it in 2020 because there won't be enough states that have signed up by then. But 2024, it's a possibility if we get enough states. At any rate, it's an agreement amongst the states so that basically it says that whoever wins the most votes in the entire country, popular votes, ends up winning that state's electoral votes. Instead of the current winner-take-all system, it means that they all go towards that one particular candidate. So again, most votes wins, a familiar concept, and it also means that one person really equals one vote, and it also means that every voter is relevant, no matter where you are. If you're a Democrat in Mississippi, or a Republican in Illinois, or a Democrat or Republican, or whatever your affiliation is, or who you vote for in Colorado, your vote is relevant, as opposed to the current system and the current way we allocate electors. So that is a very quick explanation of the National Popular Vote. I'll just tell you kind of where I'm coming from and part of the reason why I believe in it so much, and I hope that you'll support it as well and vote yes on the National Popular Vote in November, which is that in the 8 years that I've been involved in the legislature, I've seen that this is no secret, we have some systemic issues here in our politics, particularly nationally. I mean, the money in politics is outrageous. This doesn't do anything about that, I'll tell you. But also gerrymandering, I think, is something that really affects us in a negative way. But I also think the way that we elect our president right now affects us in a negative way, because it means that most Americans are ignored. Most Americans don't matter, and voters get that. When they're only voting less than 50% in a state like Texas, they get it. And if we want to make sure that voters and Americans are more invested in who's elected, we want to make sure that the person that is elected actually represents the majority of those that have voted, the majority of the country. And we want to make sure that they have good policies going forward that appeal to the majority of the country in order to be reelected. Then we need to go with the national popular vote and make sure that every vote is equal and the most votes wins. So I will leave it at that, and I know that there's some questions. I'll start, sir, you had your hand up first, so we'll just start with you.
Is there any significance to these areas that you've cut out on your map?
Is there any significance to these areas I've cut it out on the map? Well, these are considered to be swing states for 2020.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
But you've cut out certain areas.
Oh, well, I think the graphic is a way to, at least what we're trying to show, is that those are the states that matter and not the other 46 other states in the country, so.
So it was just pretty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sarah, and so my question is, if the ballot measures fails in this coming election, then will it totally reverse what was passed in the legislature?
Yes, and that's what the opponents want, and that's why they put it on the ballot. If it turns out the no votes are more than the yes votes, that means that the law is not affirmed, and that means we're no longer part of the National Popular Vote Agreement. So if we are a yes vote, it means that the law continues and we continue to be part of the National Popular Vote Agreement. And it will be actually I think I'm looking forward to a victory in this because I think it's going to show the country how popular it really is. I mean, like I mentioned, there's, in this polls, when you poll people and you say, do you think that one person should equal one vote or the most votes should win? That polls very well. And around the country, including in Colorado. And so, like I said, there's 15 states plus DC that have already implemented this, but in our effort to try to get this in more states, I think it will be very helpful that also, since it went before a popular vote in Colorado was affirmed, that it can show that it still really is popular. So, but yes, if you, like I said, if you think this is a good idea, you should be a yes, and hopefully the majority of Coloradans agree. Yes, sir.
I think it's a nifty idea if it works. I'm concerned about the constitutionality of it. Could you comment on the Baca decision?
Yes, so I'll talk a little bit, I'll reaffirm a little bit about the constitutionality and then the Baca decision, which was your question. So under Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution, it clearly says the states have plenary power, the state legislatures have plenary power to allocate their electors in the way that they choose. And that was something that the founders decided to do because they really couldn't agree on how to elect a president. So they basically punted it to the states. So they said, state legislatures, you determine how the electors are going to be allocated. And in fact, over the first 11 or 12 of our presidential elections, it was all over the map how the electors were allocated. But by the 11th presidential election, it was majority of the states were winner take all. So the Constitution allows us to do this, and it's pretty clear, in my opinion, I think many experts agree, that the states should be able to do this. So the Baca decision, what you're referencing is the faithless elector issue, which is, it actually originated in Colorado from 2016, where there were some electors that wanted to come up with a plan to make sure that even though Trump was supposed to get the majority of the electors in the Electoral College, that somehow or another the electors could deny him that victory. And so there were a couple of electors in Colorado that said, okay, we're supposed to go for Hillary because Hillary won the majority of votes here. But we won't vote for Hillary, we'll vote for somebody else as long as you, red state, don't vote for Trump. And so they were trying to get other states to do that. They didn't succeed, obviously. And so anyway, but in the process, the Secretary of State here at the time ended up removing one of the electors from Colorado because he was trying to do this. So long story short, this has led to a 10th Circuit Court of Appeals opinion, federal court opinion that's being appealed currently to the United States Supreme Court, that says that you cannot have a law that denies electors from voting the way they want to vote, regardless of how the state votes. So that's not final law yet, it's being appealed. What I think, though, if it does become final law, is it just means that the electors that we select, or the parties select, will be even more carefully vetted than they are now. There's 24 states currently that don't have any laws on the books that say the electors have to vote the way that the states want them to. They've not had a faithless elector issue. But For those of you that aren't familiar, it's the parties that select the electors. So the Democratic Party then selects their 9 electors, because we have 9 electoral votes. Republicans select theirs. In case the Democrat wins, then those slate of 9 electors from the Democrats end up going up and lodging the votes, and vice versa for the Republicans. So I think the practical effect is not much, actually, and I don't think it affects the National Popular Vote Agreement. Yes?
Well, I would suggest to you that, that you're correct about the effect of the Baca decision on the faithless elector issue. But if you have a national popular vote statute nationwide where you're there's going to be a lawsuit that's going to go to the Supreme Court. So let's say that Baca is upheld at the Supreme Court. Isn't the national popular vote movement in peril?
So I think the question is the national popular vote movement in peril, particularly if Baca is upheld? Well, I guess I'll agree with you on one thing, which is that there's going to be a lawsuit. If it gets implemented, I mean, the opponents of it have already said, we're going to sue. And so we know there's going to be a lawsuit, but that's not anything different than what we experience now whenever anything's implemented. So, but I just don't agree that Baca is going to make that much of a difference. And we may disagree with that, but I've looked through the decision, and certainly the legal folks within the National Popular Vote, the Yes on National Popular Vote, looked at it, and we don't really see too much. But I'm also an attorney, and I can tell you that nobody really ever is 100% correct when they're trying to predict what the Supreme Court's going to do. And so I'll just be straight up with that I don't want to predict exactly. But as far as I can tell, in my study of the Constitution and my study of the National Popular Vote, I think it's upheld, and I don't think Baca makes that much of a difference. Yes, sir?
You mentioned about 15 states are working on this. How many have to approve it for it to be?
Well, we don't have an exact number of how many states would have to approve it for it to go into effect, because it depends on how many electoral votes they have. So let's say that you have Texas decides to join tomorrow. They're going to add, I think, 29 electoral votes or whatever they have, which is a lot more than, say, you have a small state with 3 electoral votes to join. So the number of states that it would take depends on how many electoral votes and how many big states want to join.
So
Yeah.
it's the majority of electoral votes.
That's right. Yeah, so it requires 270 electoral votes for the president to win, or the presidential candidate to win. And so if you have enough states that represent 270 electoral votes, then the agreement goes into effect, because then it doesn't really matter what the states that aren't in the agreement do, because if you have 270 plus, those states in the agreement can elect the president. Now, those voters in those states outside of the agreement still matter, because every voter matters. It all goes to the big total of, 65 million votes is the winner, or whatever the case may be. So, but once you have 270 electoral votes, then that's when the agreement actually goes into effect. Actually, let me put an asterisk, because to go to the other gentleman's question, there's going to be a lawsuit, so that'll probably have to go through the court and wind its way through the court. But assuming the court upholds it, then once the 270 votes join the agreement, then it becomes a valid agreement. I think there might have been, I'll get to you in a minute, but there might have been a question over here too. Okay. Yes. Whoever wants to go first.
Just a quick one. Did you say that you already have 197?
196 right now.
196.
Yes.
Right now. Thank you.
Yes, and so last year was actually good for the National Popular Vote. Going into it, we added 4 states. Colorado was 1 state. Also Delaware and Oregon were added, and New Mexico. So those 4 states came on board last year. This next year, it's anticipated it'll be introduced in several other states, and Virginia seems to be a pretty decent pickup opportunity at this point in time. But who knows how it's going to go. But still, even if Virginia comes on board, and then there also was a pretty strong movement in Minnesota recently, and Michigan as well. But even if all those come on board, that still doesn't quite get you to your 270. There has to be some more states that come on board. Yes.
So how are you planning to address the situation that might arise where our national popular vote isn't the reflection of the Colorado popular vote? So, because at that point you would hope that our elector would be, faithless in a sense, because he would want to say, well, our state doesn't match with the national popular vote, but our law says that we have to delegate our votes according to the national popular vote. So what does your plan have to do with that issue? Are you gonna address that at all, or?
Yeah, sure. So the premise of the national popular vote is that the vote is actually countrywide rather than states. So voters, it's the actual voters and individuals that elect the president, not the state entities, right? So the national popular vote is a nationwide election, and so the electors from Colorado and other states would end up voting for that candidate that got the most popular votes nationwide. So that's what they would be required to do, and that's what they would do. So that's how you get your one person, one vote. That's how you get every voter matters. Because if it's a nationwide election, then that means that all the voters in Colorado actually go into the pot as far as they count nationwide. Those that vote for the Republican candidate, those that vote for the Democratic candidate, they all are counted. Unlike now, where let's say from 2008 until now, if you voted for the Republican candidate, and there were millions of votes for Republican candidates over those 3 elections, those ended up just getting tossed because that wasn't the majority of the votes in Colorado. So all of those Republican, all of those Democrat votes go into the nationwide totals, and then whichever candidate wins the most votes nationwide ends up getting the Colorado electors. Did you have a follow-up?
Well, yeah, that's the issue that I'm assuming to have a problem with, because you could have like a really large population totally outweigh our Colorado popular vote, and then we're forced by law to just succumb to that and give away our vote to the national popular vote, even if Colorado says, well, as a state, our total population voted in this direction, but the nation voted in that direction. It's like, well, we would want at that point to have the electoral college intact in order to actually say, well, our state is voting, say Democrat, for example, but the entire nation is voting Republican. It's like, well, why would we just give it away at that point?
Yeah, so a couple things about that. So
I mean, what I was just thinking is if we get to a majority of the total electoral votes that are there, then I would be more willing to accept the idea of like direct democracy. But it's like, have we gotten there? Because how many did you say were part of agreement?
there's 196 electoral votes now. Big states, small states, medium states, they're all part of it. Yeah.
So they essentially do have to win the national popular vote, or not?
No, so right now it's still status quo. It's still the winner-take-all system that we've had for many elections prior, and only if we get to the 270 electoral votes total do we have a national popular vote according to the agreement that's in there. So, and what you're referencing, I think, is kind of the big state versus small state issue. Colorado's not a small state. We're more of a medium state. We have 9 electoral votes. California has the most with 55 electoral votes, and we have 9. So under the current system, California already has many more electoral votes than we do. And like I said before, this doesn't abolish the electoral college system. So they're still going to have more electoral votes. New York's still going to have more electoral votes than us. But we're going to have more electoral votes than South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, etc. So, but even if you have the states that have more population, Texas, California, New York, Florida, whatever, even if you have those states, let's take California for example, they have 10% of our population. And that's fine, that's 10%, that's a pretty good number. Remember, I don't know too much about California, but I know they're not all the same. So they're not all gonna vote the same way. There's a lot of Democratic votes there, but there's a lot of Republican votes. But even if everyone from California or Texas or New York voted the same way, it's still not anywhere close to the margin that somebody would need in order to win the presidency. You have to have 50% plus 1. In this last election, Hillary Clinton had 65 million votes. And so it's still a small percentage of what you would need. And really, the way that we have now with the winner-take-all has led to the swing state versus non-swing state, where it's an election about who wins Michigan, who wins Wisconsin, instead of who wins the entire country. And in order for us to have a president, in my opinion, that actually governs the entire country and that tries to win the majority of Americans in order to become president, then you would need to go with the national popular vote system.
So I think until we get to that 270 mark, like you're saying, it's almost inviting the lawsuit, because, you'd hope that the delegates would say, well, Colorado is, even though the national popular vote is this, Colorado is not voting in the same, lane as the nation, so, but yet they're obligated by law. So then they're gonna have to say, well, I'm committed to Colorado as an elector, and do I wanna submit according to Colorado, or do I have to say, well, that's the kind of the problem that I have.
Okay, well, no, so let me be clear about something, and this is not in effect yet. We've joined the agreement, along with 15 other states and DC. We've joined the agreement, but we only have 196 electoral votes represented now. And so, unless and until they get to states with 270 electoral votes, this agreement does not go into effect. So, in 2020, we're gonna have the system that we've had. There would be no reason to file a lawsuit because it's not in effect yet. At some point in time, if you get enough states with 270 electoral votes, then I think what you're saying becomes valid. Then you can file a lawsuit and fight it, those types of things. But we're not there yet. Now, Colorado's in the agreement, which is what the ballot measure is seeking to affirm, but it's not going to be in effect in 2020.
Well, no, I was saying the agreement itself is inviting the lawsuit until you get into the 270 mark.
Okay. Yeah, well, you can file a lawsuit. I don't think it's the right time to file it now.
Well,
Yeah, but
I'm just saying, like, some
I
the
understand.
electors defense. So
Right.
That's
Okay.
where I was saying it might
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So to bring this back around to where you started out, if enough states want to go with the national
Popular.
vote, and we have 270 electoral votes
Right.
lined up, does that mean that all the candidates for president would spread out more evenly, or would they go to the states that have the most votes, like California, Texas?
Right. That's a good question. I mean, I think when you're operating under the premise of one person equals one vote and the most votes wins, then I think they would have to campaign throughout the country in order to get the most votes in order to win. And the way that I think you can look at that is how statewide elections play out in Colorado or in any other state. But we're familiar with Colorado, so I can give you examples of that. When you have a statewide candidate that's running for governor or secretary of state or treasurer or attorney general or whatever, they don't just campaign in Denver Metro, they campaign throughout the entire state. Or if they don't, they're gonna lose. Governor Polis campaigned in Mesa County. He was never gonna win Mesa County, the majority of votes there, but he wanted to make sure, because our state in a statewide system is one person, one vote, so he wanted to make sure he could get as many votes as he could. And so you have to campaign throughout the state in order to win the entire state. You can't just camp out in Colorado Springs, or you can't camp out in Denver. And when you look at the prior presidential elections as well, when we were a swing state, and you just kind of look at, say, field offices around the state. In 2012, 40% of the field offices for both of the Republican and Democratic candidates were in Denver Metro. So 60% of the field offices were outside of Denver Metro. And that actually went down in 2016 where it was only a third. So a third of the field offices trying to get out the vote and trying to organize are in Denver Metro, but that means 2/3 are outside of Denver Metro. And that's smart because that's what it takes to win. So, and you can look at the studies that have happened in all these other swing states, Ohio, et cetera, in the past, and it all confirms that. But I think we all know that to be a winning candidate here in Colorado statewide, you have to campaign in Denver, Fort Collins, Durango, everywhere, in order to try to pick up as many votes as possible. I think that would translate easily over to a national election.
I think we're gonna have to.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate your time. Okay.